All right, today we're cracking a code. Not just any code, but the heart's own electrical language. A language written in lines and waves that tells a really profound story about our health.
I mean, seriously, what if you could read your heart's secret diary? To look at a simple printout and just know the intricate conversation happening inside your own chest, beat by beat? Well, turns out you totally can. And that printout is an ECT. Yeah, the ECG, or electrocardiogram, it's basically a non-invasive way to eavesdrop on the heart's incredible electrical performance, its own little symphony. And today, we're going to learn how to read the sheet music. So, here's our game plan. First, we'll learn the alphabet of the ECG, the basic waveforms. Then we'll get into the grammar, which is all about how to read the paper itself. After that, we'll jump into a couple of real cases to put it all to the test. And finally, we'll wrap up with why this code is so incredibly important. Okay, so just like any language, you gotta start with the alphabet, right? The ECG is no different. Its letters are three main waves: the P wave, the QRS complex, and the T wave. And to really get what they mean, we first have to see where they even come from. So check this out. This is the entire electrical journey of a single heartbeat, all laid out. It kicks off with the SA node. Think of it as the heart's natural pacemaker. That signal creates the P wave as it zips through the atria. Then there's the super important pause at the AV node. After that, bam, a massive electrical event creates the QRS complex as the big ventricles activate. And finally, the heart resets with the T wave, getting ready to do the whole thing all over again. It's amazing. All right, let's zoom in on that first letter, the P wave. It's that first little rounded bump you see on the strip. This represents the electrical activation, or depolarization, of the atria. You know, the two upper chambers of the heart. It's kind of like the opening act before the headliner. And here's the headliner, the QRS complex. You can't miss it. It's that big, spiky part of the waveform. And it's so big for a reason. It represents the powerful activation of the ventricles, those lower chambers that have to do the heavy lifting of pumping blood to your entire body. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Okay, so after all that hard work, the ventricles have to reset, right? They need to recharge. That's the T wave. It's all about ventricular repolarization. That's the moment the lower chambers electrically get themselves ready for the very next beat. So P, Q, R, S, T. Boom, that's our alphabet.
Okay, so we've got the letters down, but just knowing letters doesn't mean you can read a book, right? You need grammar. And in the world of ECGs, the grammar is all about the rules of that grid paper it's printed on. Let's see how this whole thing comes together. So this grid is everything. Literally, everything on an ECG is measured against it. The horizontal axis, that's time. Each tiny little square is 0.04 seconds. And each big square, which has 5 of those little guys inside, is 0.20 seconds. This timing, it's the foundation for absolutely everything else we're going to do. Now, for a nice, regular rhythm, I'm going to show you one of the fastest tricks in the book to figure out the heart rate. It's called the 300 method. You just count the number of big squares between 2 beats and divide 300 by that number. Seriously, it's that simple, super quick, and it works. All right, time for a little pop quiz. You're looking at an ECG strip, and you count exactly 3 large squares between those big spikes. Using that 300 method we just talked about, what's the heart rate? Go on, give it a shot. Did you get it? The answer is 100 beats per minute. It's just 300 divided by 3. See? With that one little piece of math, you're already starting to read the language. Let's keep going. All right, so we've got the alphabet, we've got a little bit of grammar. Now it's time to put it to the test. Let's look at a couple of real-world examples and see how we can decode the heart's messages.
Okay, look at this comparison. On the left, you've got a nice, normal, steady rhythm. But on the right, that's a common arrhythmia called atrial fibrillation, or AFib. The 2 dead giveaways are right there. First, the rhythm is totally chaotic. We call it irregularly irregular. And second, if you look really close, where are the P waves? They're gone, replaced by this kind of shaky, wavy bass line.
Okay, for our next mystery, let's focus on that PR interval. Remember, that's the pause right after the P wave. So what would it mean if that pause is consistently just a little too long on every single beat? Well, a PR interval that's always too long points to something called a first-degree AV block. All this means is that the signal is still getting from the atria to the ventricles, but it's hitting some traffic along the way. And since we know one large square is 0.20 seconds, a PR interval that's longer than that's our key.
Let's make it super practical. Say you measure the PR interval and it's 6 of those little squares long. You just do the math. 6 times 0.04 seconds equals 0.24 seconds. And since that's longer than our 0.20 second speed limit, yep, that confirms a first-degree AB block. Wow, okay. We've learned the alphabet, we've tackled the grammar, and we've even analyzed a few cases. So the big question is, why does any of this matter? Let's do a quick final review to lock in this knowledge and see the bigger picture. All right, quick review. Let's go back to the very beginning. That very first wave we learned about, the P wave, what's actually happening in the heart to make that little bump appear?
That's right, it represents atrial depolarization, the electrical activation of the heart's upper chambers. Simple as that.
Okay, one more for you. Let's test that 300 method again. If the rhythm is regular and you count just 2 large squares between beats, what's the heart rate? The rate is a speedy 150 beats per minute. You just apply the 300 method. 300 divided by 2 is 150. And just like that, you've picked up some of the most fundamental skills for reading an ECG. That's awesome. And, that's what this is really all about. These aren't just squiggly lines on a page. This is a rich, detailed language that speaks volumes about our health. A language we can all start to learn, one beat at a time.